Caroline, good afternoon.
Hello, Jeff. Nice to be here. How are you?
Long time no see from 2006, I believe.
I'm glad you remember the year because it's just kind of all blended into one now. But yeah, a long time ago, and who would have thought we'd both be in Sydney, right?
I know. So how's your week been so far? Obviously, we're heading towards the end of the week. We've got, the Friday coming around. How's your week been?
Every week is just a bit crazy at the moment. So starting a new business, which I
Yeah.
guess is still kind of new. So it's a year and a half old now. And the thing that I've realized is that we used to go at quite a pace when we were working together, right? And I think it was always go, right? And that hasn't really changed very much. And but I guess over time what I've realized is there needs to be not just doing, there needs to be being as well. And
interesting. What do you mean by that? That's interesting sort of distinction.
So we all spend a huge amount of time doing, right? So we go from one thing to the next, our to-do list, and tick, 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 and then there's more, and then there's more, and then there's more.
It never ends.
And the thing is that we don't actually appreciate often where we are and what we have and who we are, just being in a moment. And there is such beauty in the present. But I think what society drives us to do a lot is just doing. So what I have been trying to bring into my life more, and it probably started when I was about 23, doing a bit of meditation. But what I've been trying to do is be more. And so rather than going 1,000 miles an hour, which is just my natural tendency to kind of scale up to that.
Because I think, Caroline, 15 plus years in investment banking, it's a long time.
Well, it was 18 in total.
Wow,
so
long time.
So I think that kind of shapes you, right? And certainly being in that kind of environment for a long time, it shapes you in terms of being someone, or just at a pace. Like we always worked at such a pace. But I remember I went to a coach. The first time I ever came across coaching was I went to a coach because I felt quite unsatisfied with my life. And I had also, at the time, I felt like I had lots of things, really, and not things, but lots of wonderful
things going on.
Life. Yeah, and like I had a great partner, and I had a lovely family and a good job, and I was financially secure and all those kind of things. But I felt unsatisfied. And I was like, why do I feel unsatisfied? Like this is terrible. Like I should be grateful. And my coach said to me, Caroline, every time you get somewhere, you just move the bar.
You do.
So, I got promoted and moved the bar. It was just one of those things that I wasn't appreciating what I had. And so she opened the door, and then there's a whole nother journey. But she opened the door to more of that appreciation for now, and not just constantly moving on to the next thing.
So it's more about sort of living the present, being grateful for what you have. How do you balance that between your aspirations in terms of your business, where you do need to be a bit more future thinking in a way? How do you then bring it back to being grateful for the present?
So the two can definitely exist together, right? So the doing piece is about dopamine, and dopamine is this kind of molecule of more. It pushes us to drive. It drives us for motivation. But the being piece is there's a wonderful book called The Molecule of More, and I forget the author. I'm sure you can put it in some notes, but and he talks about a dopamine is the molecule of more, and serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins. They're all about here and now. And so I actually, that's the here and now chemicals, really helping you enjoy where you are right now. And so Yeah, so I pull that together with the being and the doing. So the doing is the dopamine, and the being is the here and now chemicals.
Oh, lovely.
And
So you're able to make that distinction now.
absolutely, yeah. And you know, it's very well proven. There's a wonderful neuroscientist called Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's the head of neuroscience at Stanford, and he talks extensively around dopamine and these this balance. It's a bit like a seesaw. You need to have the here and now chemicals in order to balance out the dopamine. Otherwise, you are never satisfied. If all you're doing is pressing the dopamine button, then you will just constantly be dissatisfied. And so when I look at that from my business perspective, it's about yes, of course, there's goals and vision boards and all these things which are driving me for success, whilst at the same time there's celebration and
Celebrating the wins, so to speak.
Celebrating the wins, absolutely.
Brilliant.
And having
Lovely.
a roll around them, you know, just kind of not just going, oh, well done, right, okay, next. It's like, no, what was good about this? What did I put into this? How did I contribute to this? What did I find difficult? What did I learn from it? You know, what am I proud of? And when you can reflect with that, that's when it really beds down.
Interesting, because it seems in society and life, dopamine seems like something that can be easily attained and easily grasped. How does one work on increasing the serotonin to provide that balance?
Well, it's interesting because when you say it kind of can be easily grasped, I think it is created for us to grasp it all the time. So you know, people in marketing, advertising, people who run fruit machines, what do you call them, pokies in Australia? They've understood dopamine.
More is better,
your phone,
like buttons and all that sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Liking, you know, just that little hit of when you see the red blob on your phone screen, like that's the and you know, I better look at it. Yeah.
Got it. Interesting.
So actually, I think the reason why it seems there's so much of it is because it is fired at us all the time. That feeling of I need more. In fact, the serotonin and that being piece is very easy to come by, but we just don't prioritize it enough, I think. So really, actually, just for example, doing some meditation. Meditation brings you into the moment, and that doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the Dalai Lama sitting on a cliff in a monk outfit. You know, you literally can just spend a minute breathing and appreciating, you know, your breath going in and out. And that in itself is appreciating where you are and being present. The other thing which I actually start every day with is 3 grateful breaths. Because I don't know about you, but when I wake up in the morning, most of the time I think, oh, I haven't had enough sleep. But you've got a child, right? So
I've got 2 now, so I'm like trying to be super dad.
Exactly. Okay. So as super dad, you know, it's when you're waking up in the morning, it's probably waking up through the night as well, right?
Oh no, it's like perfect sleep, Caroline. Perfect.
Oh, I'm sure.
No,
yeah.
no, not well. Terrible.
Well, so okay, so you know, what's the first thing you think when you wake up?
I've got to get my son's lunch pack ready to go. I need to prepare for my wife. I need to make sure she's okay for my daughter. So it's very much me taking a back step and I'm just on.
Yeah.
Very task driven in the morning.
Yeah. So imagine what it would be like if you woke up and had 3 grateful breaths.
3 grateful breaths. Interesting. What do you mean by that? As in literally?
Yeah. So literally before you get out of bed, and even if those thoughts come into your mind to start off with, just take a breath in through your nose and out through your mouth and think, I'm grateful for whatever it is, the roof over my head, my wife, my family, whatever it is. And it just shifts the way you think. You're starting your day from a place of gratitude, which in itself, that's where you generate serotonin from a gratitude practice.
Mhm.
And it's amazing how that is so simple, but even just that, you can actually have a gratitude practice which is more, I guess, more robust in terms of actually having a journal and
So the whole
writing down.
gratitude journal, writing three things down every day.
Yep,
But
yep.
in the morning sounds like it's the best time to do it because it then sets you up for the day. Yeah. Or
Well, yeah, so it's interesting because I think actually the neurochemicals that you have in the morning are much more driven towards habit. So you are much more likely to be successful with habits if you do them in the morning. We just neurochemically, that's how we're driven. But at the same time, there's still a lot to be said, and because everyone's different, it's what works for you. Thinking at the end of the day, okay, well, what am I grateful for today? I mean, and you supercharge it. You have your 3 breaths when you wake up. You do a gratitude journal in the morning, 1 in the evening, right? Then you're
then you're set.
that's the. But it really, it's the science behind it is incredible in terms of people's overall frame of mind, mental health, even physical health. There's lots of research which backs up gratitude. It's not just we should be grateful.
It's not some sort of wishy-washy thing, hairy fairy hippie sort of thing. It
Yeah,
actually affects the chemicals in your brain. I didn't know
totally.
that.
Yeah. So
Wow.
actually, yeah. So people who have a regular gratitude practice, that they experience less pain, they have more energy,
They're probably more
more
healthy, so to speak. And
more mental and physical vigor, and you actually can turbocharge it by actually doing if you were to write to someone and say thank you, actually writing down and sending something to someone, even if it was an email or something, just having a practice of
saying thank
sending
you.
a thank you email every day. There's both you and the person, the receiver, have great value from that too.
Wow.
There's a wonderful researcher called Sean Acor. He wrote The Happiness Advantage, and he's got lots of different things all about happiness and how it makes us more effective and perform better. And that's one of the things.
Wow. So it's very much so a lot of your sort of coaching really sort of centers on the science of it all, doesn't
Absolutely.
it?
Yeah.
Is there room for something a bit more spiritual / religious, Caroline, or do you or is it very much the science between the balance between serotonin and dopamine, for example?
So in terms of the way I approach
Yeah,
my
personally for
coaching,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, it's I guess I'm more from a maybe more of a spiritual, not necessarily a religious perspective. I think that for me, there's an important respect for us as a kind of a human race. I don't want to sound too but
Yeah.
in terms of, and how we all interact together, and even the 10 commandments, whatever your beliefs are, those are just good advice. Don't kill each other, respect each other, all the things which are really important. And obviously different religions have different perspectives on all of those things, but at the core is goodness, right? And from my coaching's point of view, I'm obviously interacting with people from all cultures and religions.
Yeah.
And so my perspective on that is, how can I give you the tools, the information, the reflections, help you see the world and yourself in a way that is through all of those filters that you have.
So it sort of makes sense for your recipient.
Yeah, because the thing is about coaching is, as a coach, you are there to hold the client. You are there to help them be their best, and to realize their potential. It's not, there's no judgment on my side, there's no expectation or just steering. It's about allowing them to find the answers, and that they have them, but what your role is to kind of partner with them to find those and to have
sort of guide them onto this journey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And obviously, Caroline, we had a chat last week, and it's fantastic that you branched out into multiple areas of your business.
Mm.
So therefore, I'm very curious to understand, you would know what is the sort of common pushback do you get from people? Like, you know, I find that when you try to coach someone, um, it's really a two-way street, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Caroline. Um, do you
What do you mean
hear,
by that?
in a sense of that other person needs to be open to what you say? Does that matter, or is it more like you said, you to coach holding that person? So therefore, it doesn't matter.
So coaching doesn't work if just someone isn't interested. So one of the first things that you do when you're kind of talking to a new client is you're setting up the kind of framework in which you're going to operate, sometimes called contracting. And if, for example, your wife had decided that you needed coaching and you were thinking, oh my goodness, this is the last thing I need, it's going to be difficult for me to get good outcomes with you if you don't want to come and actually step into that. And so it's important that the person who you want is coming to the coaching is it's voluntary, you know, it's something that they are happy to have a play with, and you know, part of that initial discussion is kind of permission to
let me come in and help you, so to speak.
Yeah, totally. Because it is absolutely about holding the client and for them to be able to find the answers. And absolutely, sometimes people have blocks, and there are things which you can kind of energetically feel that people are struggling with, or they're not quite there yet, and it may take a few sessions for you to kind of get through those and work through them. That isn't necessarily a conscious thing, but coming back to the being and doing, what we're so used to doing, we're almost not used to feeling.
Interesting.
We step away from emotion. Like, emotion is this, oh, she's emotional.
Oh no, we don't want to be emotional in front of the
right?
meeting or the boss or the client or whatever.
Yeah.
It's weak.
Precisely.
Interesting.
And I mean, the work of Brené Brown, lots of people know. She talks her book Daring Greatly, and she had a most amazing TED talk, and it's all about the vulnerability as courage. And you know, she's just the queen of that concept. And this is you know, actually probably around when we were working together, when I was in that banking world. I think when I was first a leader, I thought I had to be invincible. You know, I was the ice queen. You know, I had to be like, oh, everything's fine all the time.
No judgments.
Yeah. even if it wasn't.
Yeah,
and
I since I'm the leader, I need to be cool, calm, and collected. I can't show any emotion, because any sort of sign of weakness, you know, is going to just filter through to everyone else. So it sort of creates that very high bar, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the thing is that you don't connect.
Yeah.
Whilst you can have, you know, pretty good outcomes. When I stepped into vulnerability as a leader, everything changed. Everything, all of a sudden, people were like, oh my goodness, you're human. And you know, actually it was,
I think so. I think so.
I made relationships that I never would have done otherwise. And you know, just actually admitting that sometimes it is difficult. It is, like, and there's no point in pretending. But you know, really, it's the leaders who actually have the courage to stand up and be vulnerable and lead. Absolutely, there are times you need to be that person who is out front, you know, showing people where you're going. And there's other times where it's like, okay, let's all just kind of stop and regroup and see where we are and how is everyone. And COVID was a great example of that. It was the McKinsey's had some interesting research. They found that it was empathy that were the leaders. Leaders who had empathy were the ones who stood out. They were the ones that people wanted to work for, versus, you know, the ones who just kind of, whatever the situation was, they weren't
full of bravado and ego and whatnot.
Yeah, but saying how are you, and genuinely how are you? You know,
because you can say how are you, but in the back of your head you're thinking, I'm gone. Doesn't matter what about the response. I'm just going to say, how are you? Get it done. I'm moving on.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. But so I think that emotion piece is something which unfortunately is squashed a lot. And
Why is that, Caroline? Why do you think that's the case?
Well, so I think a lot of it is that society is driven now about me, myself, and I. You know, I can do anything. It's all very much, it used to be about community. And it used to be that, you know, you had people around you a lot more, whereas now it's much more, I have to do it on my own. And, you know, emotions can be hard.
Yes.
They can be a bit scary. And, you know, knowing what to do with them is, as we have less and less human contact with each other, and it's more typing or, you know, whether it's apps or whatever.
Slack, you know, messaging tools and whatnot.
Yeah, which a communication in a way, but they're not, they don't connect us in that real physical sense.
Because at the same time, you know, if you have a day, for example, and you've got a Zoom from 12 to 1, another Zoom from 1:30 to 2:30, 3:30 to 5, you're literally just going through the motions, and the last thing you're going to do is connect because you're too busy focusing on what's being taught or shown in the presentation. Interesting point.
Yeah, and the amount that we're trying to squeeze in, that rate of change and information, and there's just so much piling in. It's like, I don't have time to be emotional. But the problem is, sorry.
And no, so it's like what you said before about, you know, we're always trying to achieve, right? So it just keeps us on that pattern.
Yeah, the doing. There's a guy called Ben Crow, who is the performance coach for Ash Barty. And
interesting.
Yeah.
I'm a fan. And, yes, tell me more.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet him recently, actually, and we were just having we just were chatting, and one of the things he said is, we're human beings, not human doings.
Human beings, and which goes back to what you said, the doing versus the being. Brilliant.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, he's like, I knew you'd love that.
Yes, I love that too.
Yeah, it's
so
true,
what did he
right?
say? Yeah, so what did he say a bit more about that? That's very interesting. Like, you know that, of course, right? So how did he sort of parlay that back into Ash Barty?
Oh goodness, I mean, he was talking about her kind of just connecting a lot more, and I think the way that you can see how she talks when she's, I mean, now she's obviously said that she's retiring, so assuming that continues, it'll be interesting to see where she goes next. But she is so in touch with herself.
Yes, and very composed.
Yeah, composed is a great word. And she doesn't have a big ego.
No, not at all. Crazy, amazing.
Yeah, and so, I mean, some of those people you really can go down that different path, and you could, no names mentioned, but
I could give you a name, but I'll hold back.
But yeah, I think it was, he just kind of reiterated everything that you see in the press, right? That just she was such a wonderful woman, and how she approached life and how she approached her work. Was that from that place of humility.
Wow, I'm just sort of curious, Caroline. I'm just sort of thinking in my head too. A few minutes ago, you talked about making that switch as a leader from the ice queen, so to speak, to being vulnerable in a way, right? What was that catalyst for you to make that switch? Did that coincide with, you had it all, so to speak, but you were still unhappy? Was that the catalyst in a way, or was it something else?
I think there was a little bit of a journey in terms of that that coaching side of things. In terms of just opening my eyes up to, you can be quite tunnel visioned if you don't, this is about diversity of thought, right? We can go through our lives unless we really try, unless the universe tells us, you know what, I'm going to make you go in a different direction.
And when someone makes you, that could be maybe a bit of the last straw sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you know, it's your life all of a sudden is turned upside down, and you're on a completely different path. And so I think for me, there was a bit of a gradual piece around opening my eyes up through the coaching and understanding myself more, understanding more about my values and what's important to me, and that self-awareness piece, which I think when I was younger, I was reasonable, but not to that different level. And then I had a breakup when I was 32, and I think that was kind of a kind of the worst that had happened to me. And to be honest, I think I didn't have any armor left.
Wow.
So the ice cream was gone, because you know what, I was just so devastated.
You were broken down in a way.
Yeah, totally. And you know, the goal was each minute to cry. Like, can I go 1 minute without crying? Can I go 2 minutes? Can I go 5 minutes? Can I go 10 minutes? And literally that was, you know, the baby steps of healing. And so I think from there, that was where my coach around that time had said to me, have you thought about coaching? Because you coach yourself. And I kind of listen, and you know, she didn't have to do that much work. And so then I basically left Sydney. That was when I left Sydney and moved to Singapore. And so I was on this totally different journey, kind of very raw, and a bit like, well, this is me. Everything that I thought I was going to have is now being thrown up in the air. And
you essentially naked, so to speak.
Yeah. Emotionally, yeah, absolutely. And from that place also comes kind of a lot of strength as well.
It does.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky. I met some amazing people very early, as soon as I arrived in Singapore, and they are still my wonderful friends. But yeah, I guess it was just like, well, this is it. Like, I can't hide anything. So and from there, I had so much more empathy. I think that was one of the big things. It was, you know, I hadn't had any kind of major trauma in my life up until then. It'd been pretty picturesque, really. And so that for me was that, you know, a big kind of stake. And from there, it was like, okay, cool, all right, you know, you recover and you come out the other side. But then I could understand that depth. I had much more depth to me, I think.
Funny how that works out, Caroline. It's only when you sort of go through the sewer, so to speak, that you realize that you can sort of come out clean.
Yeah. Wow. Have you found that?
Oh, it's like when we had a chat about it, was it, you know, a week or so? Yeah, definitely. You know, it's, you know, what has happened to me in my life has been huge blessings in disguise. Yeah. But of course, which I'm sure you realize that when you were 32 and you had the breakup, right there and then, it's not a blessing in disguise. It's terrible. But I suppose that's the beauty of hindsight sometimes, and connecting the dots to see how the journey sort of works. I was always curious to sort of understand, how do people really change when they don't get that rocket, you know, on their seat? Can someone really make that change? Because sometimes when that rocket gets launched under you, you might not come back.
Yeah, and you know, I guess you're shot off in a different direction, right?
You are, and you might land in a completely different planet, different area, different mindset, and you might not be able to come back.
Yeah, and I guess, is that the journey of life, right? Is that what we're meant to do? Is move forward, and through all these learnings, be all of these things. Some of us have to deal with more than others, but all of them are. And I think as you get older, you can kind of go, okay, all right, what's this one teaching me? Like
character building.
Sorry. Yeah, gloves up.
Gloves up.
How
3 breaths as well, like what you talked about. Being grateful for, hey, you're still here. What has happened yesterday, last week was terrible, but I'm still here. hence the gratitude kicks in terms of the breaths.
Yeah. There's a wonderful equation, which is suffering equals pain times resistance.
Suffering, sorry, say it again, Caroline.
Yeah, suffering
Yep.
equals pain times resistance.
Pain times resistance.
So if you're experiencing pain, you're experiencing pain. There's a factual piece to that.
Yeah.
When you resist that, you suffer more. Because you're fighting it, you're like, oh no, I don't want to do it.
You're basically trying to swim against the current.
Precisely. And so there's more suffering. And the antidote to that is acceptance. And if you can accept, okay, this is where I am, this is what's happened, and it's not blocking that emotionally. And that's coming back to the emotion piece. That's incredibly important, that we experience emotions when they come up, because if we don't experience them, they don't go away, they just get blocked.
Yeah.
And so we need to experience it and, have a bit of a, whatever it is, a cry or a shout or whatever, and then say, okay, all right, how am I moving forward? I accept that. And what is the opportunity? What am I learning? Where can I go from here? Because otherwise all you're doing is going round and round and fighting it, and that creates the suffering.
But what's interesting there, Caroline, is that that's not something that you can learn, is it?
I think, well, it's interesting, right? Because a lot of the work I'm doing now, I wish I had known when I was younger. And well, so this is the thing, right? So things like your values, understanding things like what you can control, what you can't control. There are some certain principles which I think kids now are becoming more aware of, but I think there's so much more we could do. In terms of, a lot of it comes with experience, right? And even from how your brain develops, a female brain, kind of reaches adulthood around 18, a male brain is like 22, 24 or something.
Maybe 30.
Yeah. So even through that whole period, there's so much going on from a neurological perspective, and hormones and all that stuff, that actually it's very there's all sorts of different things which are pulling you in different directions. So your ability, even if you wanted to have that kind of perspective, may be a bit limited anyway.
It's also your life stage, the journey where you're at. And like what you said, when you're younger, you could be pulled left, right, and center. You don't really know yourself. You don't have that foundation to really go back from. Wow. Okay. So where does confidence come into it, Caroline? Did you get the confidence? Obviously, you were in Singapore. You were very quick in terms of reacquainting to the country, the people, the culture, so to speak. Does that also come down to you, Caroline, having that confidence that you could move forward?
Definitely, to an extent. I think I'm the youngest of 4 in the family. And so I think in order to survive, you have to be tenacious to an extent, and, fight for food and a place and to be heard and all that kind of thing. So I think that there's, part of that comes with that. And I'm very lucky. I have amazing parents who are incredibly caring and loving and supportive, and, just uncompromisingly so. So when you come from that level of security, it gives you a huge amount of confidence to manage change. Right. And so, I've always had that belief, you can do anything you want, and well, why shouldn't I? And, well, why shouldn't I? I'm the youngest.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, why not?
I deserve to be heard. Having said that, though, I still had lots of moments without confidence and imposter syndrome, and
you're just human. We're just human.
Precisely. And this is the thing, everyone, when we look at people, we think, oh, they're so lucky because they don't have this, I have this negativity, and, I'll tell you what, everyone has that, to different extents. But the way that you can build confidence is by knowing yourself, because then you trust yourself. And then by just having a go.
Having a go.
Yeah.
Conquering fear in a way and just having a go? Or what do you mean by just
Yeah,
having a go?
So stepping outside of your comfort zone. So the thing is that we will never, imagine you're on a beach and you're looking at the sea. This is me probably when I first got to Australia and thinking there's no way I'm getting in that water, right? There's sharks, I'm going to drown. And
you're gonna slip, slap, slap, sunscreen.
Precisely, exactly, all the essentials.
Yeah.
And but then, you know, I was like, actually, you know what, I actually quite want to have a go in the water. So you kind of put your feet in, and you know, after a while you have a swim around, and you know, probably a couple of years in, I was then doing the, you know, swimming the Bondi to the Bondi Bay.
Oh wow.
And
Big achievement.
Not very well, let's be
honest.
Well,
hey, you had to go.
Had to go. And this is the thing, had I not tried, I would have still been on the beach, and I wouldn't have realized that I could do these things. And this is the thing, you know, a lot of my focus is on women and confidence, because there's lots of different research, but there was an interesting piece done which was looked at men and women doing a 3D report, a 3D quiz. And
3D quiz. Okay, that's interesting.
It was a quiz that they had to do. And what they found was that men scored better than women. But when they looked at the results, they actually looked at what happened. If women found any of the questions hard, they skipped them, whereas men just had a go. And when they forced women to, when they said all of that, you have to answer all questions, men and women got the same results. And so this is the thing, if you don't try, you guarantee failure.
Why is there a distinction between male and female, Caroline, in terms of that question where they would just, if it's hard, they'd leave? Why would they leave it out?
Well, I mean, listen, that's the big question, right? You know, I think there's so much in terms of, is there a physiological difference? You know, the way that our brains work. Male brains are more driven towards competition. Women's brains are more driven towards collaboration. And that's from a very young age. You see that in behavior of young boys and young girls. And women are also much more about connecting. There's the social piece is very important from a very early age as well. So is there part of it which is associated with I don't want to compete against other people? Is there something around that, from a confidence point of view, whereas men are more driven by testosterone and it's competition?
But to prove myself, we're going to win it, we're going to get it done all the way. Yeah.
And you know, some of the research shows that women ruminate more. And so, you know, processing, you know, our brains are more emotional and are processing things in a more complex way as well. So with that in mind, you know, can we take a step too far, overthinking things, overthinking scenarios? You know, the number of times, you know, my partner would just be like, you're completely overthinking it. Like, it's this or this. And I'm like, yes, but what about this and this? And, you know, it could be, and they might have said, and he's like, you're completely nuts. Like, that's total nonsense. So I think that, there's some really interesting imagery that they've done of male and female brains. It was University of Pennsylvania, I think, and they looked at functional MRIs, so functional magnetic resonance imaging, and saw that the majority of the kind of messages in your brain for men are front to back. So very much either or. Whereas women,
very binary.
Binary, exactly. Whereas women, the messages is they cross all the hemispheres. It's and it's fascinating when you see the difference. They looked at men and women, you know, young to old. And
is that risk management in a way, Caroline? Maybe, I don't know. Like,
well, this is the thing. So you know, from a risk management perspective, you know, quite a lot of the more, I guess, it was in the financial crisis, they found that women were better risk managers. And so whereas women might take longer to make a decision, the research implies that it's because they're looking at more data points.
They're crossing, they're going back, going forth.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of looking at it all, turning it around. Okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? Whereas men are, it's that more binary, yes, no, this, that, which is why sometimes you can have that kind of
mismatch.
Yeah, exactly. When women are talking to men and you're kind of crossing
So
paths.
if your partner goes to you, Caroline, you're crazy, you're overthinking, right? How does that then work, Caroline? Do you then accept it and go, hey, maybe I do need to think of it as a binary yes, no? Or is it more in a sense of go away, I need to cross the T's and whatever to come to my own conclusion because that's just how I am. The reason why I say that, Caroline, I give you an example literally half an hour ago. So my wife is interested in doing this political science degree, which is offered by the university. The catch, of course, is that they're only going to bring in 20 people and you need to fill in an application form. Now, I always know my wife, she always had that interest in sort of policy making, really understanding the mechanics behind, setting policy for a society. So she goes, so being me and maybe being the man, so to speak, it's easy. You just fill in the application form, get it done, see what happens. Nice and easy. Very, very quick answer, right? So she goes to me, actually, maybe there are other women out there who would find this of greater value, hence I shouldn't take it and apply. And then I'm going, well, that may be true, but if you don't try, you're not going to know. You're making an assumption that's the case. So I'm going to her, just complete it, give it a go. Even if you don't get it, you at least have the experience of answering questions which you might need to get accustomed to going forward.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of an actual current example for you of the thinking difference.
Yeah, interesting. And it's I guess there's variance from the norm, right? So you can kind of think, oh, okay, should I apply for this? Or maybe it'll be a bit competitive. How will I fit it in with my life? Probably, I've got 2 kids. What should I be? And that's a smart.
It's a rational thinking. It's rational.
Precisely, and that's important, right? And it's important that you're acknowledging what feelings you have, what experience you have, and that you're putting it through those filters. I think the danger comes when you start scenarios which are quite far-fetched and don't necessarily have the ability to pull in from there, because that is your wife is obviously an extremely generous person. Like, how lovely for her to think I might not.
Maybe it's like what you said, Caroline, in terms of the whole sort of social community thing. We don't compete, we work together. But then by her going down that path, she loses her opportunity.
Yeah. Well, and this is why, it's a wonderful combination. This is why, when we talk about gender equality, we're not talking about, women taking over everything. We're talking about bringing the best of the brains together in organizations.
Yeah, because we need
and
both.
It's the combination,
which is
both. Absolutely. You need both. And that's when you have both, you get so much better outcomes. Because you're bringing together. Sometimes you do need to be a bit more binary about it, but sometimes you need to have more of that consideration, whether it's risk or people or the emotional impact of things, and the binary thing just won't work, or it's a hammer and just smashing it in, and woe betide all the outcomes which you have as collateral damage.
Interesting. So, Carolyn, you mentioned obviously women and confidence is a key area you work on, right? So what do you tell these women who are in these certain positions and whatnot? As we talked about before, you've corporate clients, you've individuals, there's online, right? So what do you tell these people, these women who may be lacking in confidence?
That's a very long course. But so basically the way the principles that I'm looking at is a lot of the coaching, a lot of the training that you would see normally. And I've had a lot of training in my life. You know, I'm very lucky to be part of corporates where I have been trained within an inch of my life. And as a result of that, I saw lots and lots of training. And the thing that I saw, some of it was excellent, but what I saw a lot of was training you, but without the why.
And it was the why. Okay.
Yeah, you know, just kind of, it's, you know, do this and you'll be more confident, or you know, speak up. Maybe it's communication skills, but there wasn't a why do we react in this way? Why do I feel this way? Why do I doubt myself? And if you think of it like an iceberg, you know, that there's the piece on the top, which is the outcome, your behaviors and your actions. But underneath, there's so much more to it, which is about who am I? Who do I believe I am? Who do I, what are my values? And, you know, what's that real subconscious belief that I have? And if you don't understand what's underneath the water, the outcomes of training, which, you know, is that surface level, it won't last, or it just won't be very effective.
It could also pull you in so many directions, because you, like what you said before, you need to know yourself.
Yeah. So I guess what I work on is the whole lot. If I was going to describe it, it's, you know, we look at who are you, where have you come from, what is your belief, you know, what is confidence, but what is real confidence? And this is why I talk about authentic confidence, because there's the bravado piece, there's the kind of, you know, maybe what society would define confidence as, but what I'm talking about is real, where you're integrating your internal and external authenticity. You know, there's not a break between them. You're not pretending to be something you're not, because ultimately real confidence is when you are 100% unapologetically yourself, because I've got nothing to hide. This is me. And no one can knock you off that, because it's like, this is me.
Yeah.
So that's what we get to. It's about really helping people see who they are, and that it's okay to be you, and what are all the beautiful things, what are the amazing things about you, whether it's your values, your experience, and then loads of different tools.
I'm sold. Wow, so that's brilliant. So great analogy in terms of the iceberg, Caroline. So you're right. You know, I look back and I realize there's a lot of training that I've done in the past where it's just the tip of the iceberg. But what's most important, and like what you're doing, is that you're doing it from the base and then going up.
Yeah.
Fantastic distinction.
And the thing is that that sticks. That's when it's really super sticky, because it's something which you're fundamentally changing, that self-belief. And otherwise you can kind of go and, you know, maybe Toastmasters, wonderful, amazing, in terms of getting some of that kind of high level confidence. But if you fundamentally think you're a fraud, then you'll always have that feeling. So
imposter syndrome, being a fraud and whatnot. It's like basically saying, unless you fix the core, you know, if you're a tree, for example, and the stump and the roots are diseased, so to speak, it's going to make no difference if you repair one of the branches.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas when you have that root structure, which is really strong, whatever storms come, your tree will be fine. It can bend and shape, and but because you've got those anchors, which keep you true to yourself. And this is what a lot of what we're doing. It's like, what are your values? What's important to you? Who are you? You know, when you're making big decisions, understand what is important to you, because otherwise you can make the wrong decision. And then dealing with your inner critic, if all the time you're listening to that negative voice, which everyone has, and you don't know how to manage it, and you feel like it's such an integral part of yourself, it can be extremely destructive, and ultimately, lots of people end up with chronic stress and, burnout, depression because of that. It's like having a radio playing all the time saying you're a loser, you're fat, you're ugly,
you're not good enough.
You're not good enough, you haven't done this, you're stupid. And when you start tuning into it, you go, oh my goodness, that's just horrible.
It's like that sort of those analogy where you have that little person on you. That little person on you can be egging you on in a positive way.
Yeah.
Or that person could be just dragging you down.
Yeah.
So where does that negativity come from, Caroline? Kids and, like carefree, they can do anything, right? Do you think, I'm curious to understand and get your thoughts on where does that negative voice come from?
So there's a couple of answers to that. So there's, on the whole, for most people, if you talk to them about so let's tune into your critic. Like, what does it say and where does it come from? And if you're going to name it, what name would you give it? It tends to be something from your childhood, maybe a parent, maybe a sibling, teacher, friend, whatever, or not a friend, someone at school. And depending on how reinforced that was, or how strong that initial experience was, depends how loud the voice continues to be.
And fortunately or unfortunately, it can really set the tone for how you live your life.
Yeah. Because if you're told you're stupid, if a teacher told you at school you'll never make it, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're stupid one in the family, and if that was playing, on repeat for years, or for that 1 year that you were in that teacher's class, that will keep coming. Absolutely. So it tends to come from there. The other interesting part of it is that we are tuned in to notice negativity more. So it is an adaptive response, which is, it's quite helpful in terms of we're still on the planet as a result. And it's ultimately, if we see things which might kind of cause us danger, which is essentially kind of what it is, it's trying to protect us. If we notice that more, as much as it's lovely noticing, flowers and excitement and joy, that's not going to save us when a saber-toothed tiger is running towards us. So the way our brain works is, I need to look out for danger. And
hence, if there's news, hence what dominates the news nowadays is that negative news, but that's what draws the attention.
Totally. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we're much more pre-programmed to notice it. It's like if you have a performance review and your manager talks to you for 55 minutes about all the wonderful things you've done, and then they talk to you for that 5 minutes about the one thing you did wrong, and that's all you can remember, and you're just furious about it for the next right? It's like that gets seared in our memories, whereas the other stuff's like, but they said this.
Don't worry about the 99 good bricks. I'm going to focus on that one bad one.
Right? Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the Gottman Institute is focused on relationships, and one of the things that they talk about is the fact you have to have 5 positives for every 1 negative. 5 positives for every 1 negative. Okay.
So
I'm helping your relationship here. So so if you say something negative, in order to kind of, because that resonates so much, the same principle applies, you need to have 5 positive things in order to make up for that negative. Because otherwise what can happen is you end up just in that kind of niggly piece where you're just going back and forth, and that can end up down a spiral of actually ruining relationships. So that is one of the things which they talk about.
So we have a phrase in Chinese called 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of SHIT.
Right.
But it seems to me they're telling me that you need to put 5 teaspoons of sugar.
Yes. Yeah. And when you look at when you look at the kind of primary colors of emotions, the that there are more of those emotions which are called kind of escape avoidance emotions versus those which are the kind of love and trust. And I studied some neuroscience with an amazing teacher, applied neuroscientist called Professor Paul Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And he has something called the London Protocol of Emotions, which is was some research that he did, kind of looking at what are the primary colors. So there's lots and lots of different ways that we talk about emotions, but what are the things which really which make us up from an emotional perspective? And when you look at that, it is weighed more towards what we would call negative. They're not negative because they're very important, but they're more, fear and anger and disgust and shame and sadness. Whereas you have love and joy, which kind of and an excitement piece on that kind of positive side, as it were.
So sorry, Caroline, why does the fear or distrust or that negative stuff, why does that dominate? Sorry?
Because it keeps us alive.
Oh, okay, so it really comes back to the fundamental sort of flight versus fight response.
Yeah, totally. Because this is the thing. So our brains are about, in current form, are about 200 million years old. So we're operating on very old hardware. And that hardware has kept us alive, in the saber-toothed tiger kind of world, woolly mammoths, all that. So fear was going to get us away from whatever it is attacking us. Shame is something that might threaten our position in a tribe, and being part of a tribe is incredibly important in terms of our safety. Disgust is probably about eating something and it being poisonous. And anger is something about someone who is, again, kind of from a tribe threatening perspective. And sadness is losing someone in that tribe. So these are kind of primary emotions, which are all very important in terms of us surviving. And but the problem is that when we look at our filter today, office politics can make us feel like we're threatened in a tribe. Someone pulling out on us in a car park can.
Because the workplace is a tribe.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, and so when you start in a new workplace, you're trying to find your tribe, right? You're not part of it yet. So
you're the new member who's trying to get into the tribe. Therefore, you may need to prove yourself. You may need to be a bit more less of confrontational, so to speak, until you establish your rank, so to speak, within the tribe. Interesting.
Yeah. And that is safety for us.
So what about new software? What is hardware?
We're developing it very slowly, I think.
Why is that?
Well, 200 million years is we've come pretty far, but
for me, right, 200 million years, right? The hardware hasn't changed, but you figure 200 million years, Caroline, we would have don't worry about the hardware. I don't think we can change the hardware. You figure the software would allow us to adapt. No? But it seems from what you've been sharing with me, right, is that the formation of the mind, so to speak, 200 million years in terms of tribes and whatnot, survival is no different from now in terms of the tribe being the workplace. And survival means I keep my job so I can put food on the table. So therefore, it's quite synonymous. So maybe, therefore, there's really no need for new software.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, unfortunately, a lot of the situations now that we're in, they cause us this survival response. And it is inappropriate. So, this is why so many people are stressed now. We have such high stress levels because we have this, your boss hasn't called you for a few days, you're working from home and you're thinking, oh my goodness, you have a negativity bias, you're automatically assuming, and then they go, can I have a word? And you think, oh, he's going to sack me. She's going to sack me. The number of people I've spoken to, and they're like, my boss called me and I thought, what have I done? And because we don't have the same social cues because we're not in the office anymore. And so, you know, when your boss used to morning, you know, just as they went past, even if they're in their office all day, you know, that kind of, you know, everything's okay. That in itself is a calming of any stress levels. And
it'll bring you comfort.
totally.
It brings down the fear alerter, so to speak.
Precisely. Yeah.
Interesting.
Precisely. And so when everyone's remote working, we have a tendency to assume the worst. And so this is where connecting, being vulnerable, you know, where from a leadership perspective, leaders have to be operating in a completely different way. They can't just be plug and play. I'll just do the same thing to people at home. If anything, they need to really step it up. And, you know, it's, you know, you don't need to put emojis on everything that you do, but, you know, being conscious of, if you just say, okay, on your email, people might, you know, is that, are they angry? Like, is there, whereas I actually have a theory. I have a theory on this, which I'm going to share with you.
Got it.
I have a theory that a lot of women are good at touch typing.
Touch typing.
Typing, you can type and not look.
Okay, I can't multitask. I'm focused.
Yeah, so well, lots of, and particularly older managers tend to be men. Yep. Just from the corporate pyramid perspective and, you know, time. And when they type, they tend to use these. So 1, 2. You know, typing, you know, in the days of my father, you know, he would dictate to his secretary, and she would be typing it out for him. So we're not quite at that stage now, but I think there's certainly a lot of people who are older, who, look, for them to write a long email. So I write an email and say, hi Jeff, you know, great to chat, really enjoyed our discussion, hope you had a good day, hope your wife was great, you know, just to let you know, blah, 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 thanks very much, Caroline. And that will take me a minute. For the people who are typing like this, they're like, thanks, Jeff, Caroline, because it just takes them so much longer, right? So the softness around email, which is so important, because think of the negativity bias. You know, we tend to think when an email comes through, whatever it is, it tends to be, we think of it from a negative point of view. We need that softness to make people realize that it's, you know, that all is well. You don't have to have a threat response. If you don't have the ability to touch type, or, you know, just even type fast, or the inclination to learn, then you're much less likely to be able to create some of that softness. That is not a research-based approach. That is just, that's my thing.
I reckon that's pretty sound, because you're right. Because, okay, that's interesting. You're right. So if you have someone who's like this, so to speak, and, you know, regardless of the situation, he or she just doesn't like typing, right? That person could be misconstrued when an okay, they're actually typing okay with a massive smiley face. But obviously when it comes through the messaging channel, the recipient only sees okay, but not that gleaming smile. And that gleaming smile can't go into the keyboard because I can't type quick enough, and I gotta rush into the next meeting.
Exactly.
I think that's a pretty sound
one. That fine. And you're like, oh, fine. Fine. You know, fine can be anything, right?
So is it more about getting people to not take these things so seriously? Because by interpreting these little keystrokes and these words and whatnot, you could go crazy.
And people do, yeah.
You know, like you look at the email, you go, this doesn't mean this, doesn't mean that. That could put you in a massive head spin, regardless if it was pre or post COVID.
Yeah. The thing, pre-COVID, we had more social cues. We had more social messages to, you know, everything is okay. I think there's two parts to it. So there's a piece around the work that I do, primarily what I do in terms of the confidence. So around how can you help people feel absolutely at their best. so that they are operating at their best from a place where they are completely themselves. And they're bringing all of their cognitive bandwidth to the table because they're not in a state of fear. They're bringing up things which are important. They feel comfortable to speak up, therefore they challenge, etc., etc. So there's a confidence piece as an individual. But then on the other side, you have an organizational piece. And organizations need to make it safe for people to operate as well. And so this is where I think lots of organizations maybe aren't quite there yet in terms of creating psychological safety. And that is the environment in which I'm operating in. I feel safe to be myself. And so there's that external piece and there's the internal piece to it.
How do you, if we, obviously it's just a sample size. We look at corporate Australia, where you mentioned obviously a lot of, a lot of men in that positions, and by all means, they could be a bit older. But putting that aside, right, how does one bring psychological safety into organization?
Education is number one. I think people need to understand a lot of what we've been talking about and what the power is of it. So if you have all the brains in your organization in a state of fear, they're not using the prefrontal cortex. They're not using the smart executive functioning part of the brain.
We're constantly in that fight mode. We've got to protect. We've got to protect.
Precisely. So you're not thinking, oh, strategically, where should we be going if we look up?
There's no clear mind. There's no healthy mind because you're too busy worrying about, I got to keep my job. I got to get that client coming in the door.
Exactly.
That's why culture is so important in an organization then, when you think about it.
But well, this is the thing, and I think this is where we get lost, because culture is this kind of weird thing that people try and nail down, but there's never been any science behind. There's been little science in terms of why that is so important. And for me, the most fundamental thing is some of the work by Sean Acor. Like, your brain is 31% more productive at positive than negative, neutral, or stressed. So if you create a culture where people feel safe, where they feel they can be themselves, where they feel positive, where you go for drinks sometimes, or a team building day, that cultural piece that we talk about, which is the kind of, I'll just leave it to the head of culture. That stuff is real. It is absolutely real in terms of organizational performance. And the problem is people in a lot of the positions, at the senior positions who are making the decision, the actual decision makers, don't understand that. Because when you put it from the perspective of, this is a performance issue, whether or not, let's just say you don't even care about the people in your organization. If you want them to perform better, create an environment where they feel safe, because then they will use their brain in the way which creates all of that, uses all of the part of their brain which is creative and problem solving.
Makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But so why do organizations don't do it? And it makes perfect sense, Caroline. If you create an environment where your employees have an environment where they can feel safe, where they can be themselves, it's sort of a bit of a no-brainer, no?
Yeah. Well, and this is why I kind of hold my head, now when I hear of organizations who are still operating on fear, or we just drive them hard, and it's so sad.
Bit of a stick.
Because it's so sad, and it's counterproductive. Yes, you can get outcomes which are you can achieve.
You can achieve astronomical things by all means.
Yeah, but at what cost? And if you look at the individuals that you had, that you achieved those outcomes with all of those costs, just think what you could have done if with people who were actually really operating at their best. Like, that's the organizations which are the stratospheric organizations, are the ones which they have that kind of culture, they have that leadership. And I think
really top down, isn't it, Caroline?
Yeah, totally. It has to be. Yeah. And this for me is an interesting part about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because what I think has happened over the years is the number of times I would go to a International Women's Day conference or, celebration, and there's two guys in the room, and there's 500 women, and there's this like, oh, cheer for the men who are in the room, well done. It's like, oh my goodness, really? This is precisely the problem. And of course it's wonderful celebrating and having women and networking, all that stuff, but it's like, I think if we change the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion into, let's talk about psychological safety and about performance and people understanding how brains work in organizations,
that naturally gets answered.
Totally, it does, because then that brings in everyone to the conversation. That is men and women.
It's not about women, men. It doesn't matter if you're brown, black, yellow, orange, or purple. Yeah. It's not about that. It's about fundamentally who we are as a human species. And if we work on the fundamental building blocks, those problems in terms of inequality and diversity issues and whatnot, they get naturally solved because we focus on the fundamentals.
Yeah, diversity of thought.
Diversity of thought. You got it, Caroline. See, I knew you'll get it. Wow.
Well, this is the thing. So
I knew you'll get it. That's why I just saw those. Like, Caroline, I just felt something was right here.
Yeah. So this is where I genuinely believe that the organizations who are forward thinking, that will really will grab hold of this in a different way. I've just started working with a very traditional company in the UK, and to their absolute credit, they I'm delivering my course to them, and because they believe in this, because they believe in psychological safety. And I think the organizations of the future will be the really successful ones, will be the ones who say, you know what, let's have this kind of conversation. Let's not talk about women. Let's talk about.
It's not about women at all, is it?
No, it's about bringing all of that together. How do we create an environment where everyone can be their best?
Here's a funny thing, Caroline. In an alternate world in 2045, right? There's a campaign called Yes We Can. Hope you like that, by the way. For some reason, I'm thinking, why don't it be pretty cool if we become Prime Minister of Australia, right? And the reason why I say that, right, is what you said, right? It's not about male, female, and whatnot, right? And I'm thinking to myself, well, I agree. It's not about being liberal, Labor, progressive, Greens, black, white. We're just people at the end of the day. We really just want the same thing, right? So wouldn't it be wiser to have leadership or think in a more of a collective front where we don't categorize each other?
Yeah.
Yes, totally. We can. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
I'll send you a show in 2034, by the way.
Brilliant. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I
agree. Unfortunately, we are shaped by genetics and history, right? So, and sadly, we're moving more apart than we ever have been before. And it's like, how do we try and knit that back together? The diversity of thought is a part of that. Is it's okay to have people who you disagree with.
Yes, and it's okay to disagree.
Yeah, that's cool. You've got your opinion, I've got mine.
Yeah, knock yourself out.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I think we're all so frightened of conflict, and because we don't have, we're not kind of taught how to deal with that. It's you then just shy away from it entirely, and you can end up with your echo chamber of conversation because you only surround yourself with people like you. And
that's also an ego thing, Caroline.
Totally. What would you say about that?
Well, in a sense of, we have so much conflict. I'm just putting it out there, right? Because I believe that I'm in this shirt. I'm better than you, Caroline, because you're wearing this lovely coral covered shirt, for example. So it's that ego where I'm better than you, therefore conflict arises. But wouldn't it be good to flip it around and go, you know what? It's her choice. It's my choice.
Yeah.
So why don't we adopt the characteristics of being humble in our approach? Um, just a thought, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm sort of doing this, right? I think we are turning into a world where we're trying to bite each other's heads off. At the end of the day, you know, it's all about that diversity of thought. You have your views, I have my views. You know, we haven't spoken for a long time, yet here we are. And it's, you know, and do you still remember, you know, 1 hour, 20 minutes ago, you were like, Jeff, how do we approach this? What do we do? And I'm very happy to say to you that we've almost gone 1.5 hours, and just
yeah, absolutely.
That's the beauty of it all, eh?
Well, and to be honest, that's about curiosity, right? It's curiosity and it's acceptance. You know, and the combination of the two is, oh, what about that? That's interesting. Oh, tell me more. And you know, when you can see things like that and not take it as this, you know, is from a coaching point of view, one of the things you're taught is you're not holding on to anything. There's no agenda. If a client says to you, you know, that's not working for me, you don't go, oh no, I've done the wrong thing. You say, okay, great. No, so what would work? So what, you know, so if we took two steps to the side, what would that look like? And you just let it go.
You
and
be
it's
your
just
genuine self.
Yeah, without it impacting you and your ego, because that's not what it's about. Because as soon as you hold on to that, yeah, then you can't coach people in a way you're not serving them in the
you had that armor that at times you carry with you that drags you down, and it doesn't allow people to open into you, and you can't get out of that piece of armor because it's just so heavy on the chest. Interesting. Caroline, I'm conscious that we almost hit 90 minutes. I'm pretty sure I can make another conversation. Let's mix it up. You know, like, I always believe that these conversations, I remember a colleague of mine back in 2012, he said, whatever happens, rain, hail, or sunshine, you always got to end it with a laugh. And we got to have a laugh, Caroline, right? So I'm going to throw you an oddball question, right? I didn't tell you.
As long as you don't ask me to tell a joke.
Sorry?
As long as you don't ask me to tell a joke, because I'm rubbish at telling jokes.
No. Just as a side point, I love the lame ones. They're the best ones, by the way.
Okay.
So obviously, Caroline, if you don't mind me saying, you are potentially heading back to the UK. Is that correct, or coming up? 30 years time, Caroline, 30, 40, 50. You hit the time in your life where you go, you know what? I sort of know it's coming to an end, so to speak. I'm very thankful of the journey of where I've come from. Paint for me where you are now. 30, 40 years time, Caroline. Are you in Cornwall, for example, in the UK? You're sitting, you love the water so much that you have this coastal property overlooking this lovely view. You know, who's with you? What's on your mind? Can you paint me a picture of Caroline in 30, 40 years time?
Okay. Just off the top of my head.
Yeah, so, off the top of your head. I didn't give you zero preparation. That's the beauty of it all.
Yeah, totally. So where would I be? So for me, life is a bit of a roast dinner, and there's lots of beautiful parts to it. And
lovely analogy.
My home will always be the UK, so I think there will always be something there, and whether it's countryside or London, I don't know, but you know, something. And I love the south of France, or France on the whole. There's something about just the pace and, you know, just the lifestyle and, you know, a bit of heat. You know, hopefully the world will be in a better state, and that we can all actually live in it something which is, you know, as we would hope. And yeah, and I guess surrounded by, you know, family and friends and my partner, and, you know, just that joy and knowing that I've made an impact, and
So
that
it's more the
I,
feeling as opposed to a physical destination, in a way.
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I see myself in sunshine with rosé and beautiful food, and,
Yeah, tell
you
me
know,
this.
that
Tell
may be
me, tell me
Italy, that may be France.
what type of food is it, Caroline?
Oh, I mean, all the freshness of whether it's Italy or France, that beautiful bread and cheese and
Love it.
all those meats, and yeah, fresh fruit and tomatoes and all
A
that.
a
Gorgeous.
slower pace of life in a way,
Yeah, definitely.
enjoying it a
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
more.
totally. Good music, and yeah,
Good
just lots of
companionship.
laughter. Yeah, totally.
You gotta
Very
have a laugh,
important.
don't you?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
are you gonna tell me a joke or not?
There'll be no
Caroline,
how to
before we
end on
sort
a
of before we sort of come to a conclusion, any sort of final thoughts, final remarks?
Well, I mean, I guess the only thing, just from a confidence point of view, I guess, in terms of that, if people are feeling like they lack confidence, to know that there's a way out, to know that it is not, you know, you are not fixed. There's so much that you can do. There's so many ways that you can grow, and because for me, confidence is everything in terms of how you can take on the world, in terms of how you manage yourself, your family, you know, your boundaries, your happiness levels. And so taking control of that is open to everyone. So that, I think, is something which is important.
Fantastic, Caroline. Caroline, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me on this conversation. I came in this conversation with zero expectations. It has worked perfectly, you know, running this sort of podcast. Curiosity, an open mind. But Caroline, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll see you soon.